Welcome everyone to the April 19th, 2023 regular meeting of the San Francisco Elections Commission. I'm the President, Robin Stone. The time is now 6:06 p.m. and I call the meeting to order. This meeting is being held in person at City Hall, room 408, 1 Dr. Carlton B. Goodlett Place, San Francisco, California, 94102, and on WebEx. As authorized by the Election Commission's February 15th vote, members of the public may attend the meeting to observe and provide public comment either at the physical meeting location or online. I'll briefly explain some procedures for participating in today's meeting. Public comment will be available on each item on this agenda. Each member of the public will be allowed 3 minutes to speak. Once your 3 minutes have expired, staff will thank you and you will be muted. When providing public comment, you're encouraged to state your name clearly. As soon as you begin speaking, you will have 3 minutes to provide the comment, but 6 minutes if you are online with an interpreter. Additional details and instructions for participating remotely are listed on the Commission's website and on today's meeting agenda. In addition to participating in real time, interested persons are encouraged to participate in this meeting by submitting public comment in writing on the day of the meeting to elections.commission@sfgov.org, and it will be shared with the Commission after the meeting is concluded and will be included as part of the official meeting file. I will now proceed with item 1, the commission roll call. Vice President Jordanek.
Here.
Commissioner Bernholz.
Here.
Commissioner Dye.
Here.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Here.
Commissioner Lavolsi has, and I'm noting for the record, has an excused absence. Commissioner Parker.
Here.
And I myself, Robin Stone, am present. I would also like to just briefly, before we get into the next order of the call to order and roll call, like to briefly introduce Marisa Davis, our new Elections Commission Secretary, who has joined us today. We're all giving a proverbial clap, and so happy to have her on board. And she'll be listening today, and then next month we'll be up and running. So welcome, Marisa, to the Elections Commission. And then I will quickly state the following land acknowledgement that was adopted from our October 19th, 2022 Elections Commission meeting. The San Francisco Elections Commission acknowledges that we are on the unceded ancestral homeland of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of the San Francisco Peninsula. As the indigenous stewards of this land, and in accordance with their traditions, the Ramaytush Ohlone have never ceded, lost, nor forgotten their responsibilities as caretakers of this place, as well as for all peoples who reside in their traditional territory. As guests, we recognize that we benefit from living and working on their traditional homeland. We wish to pay our respects by acknowledging the ancestors and relatives of the Ramaytush community and affirming their sovereign rights as First Peoples. Okay, we'll now move to item number 2, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the Elections Commission's general jurisdiction that is not covered by any other item on this agenda.
Just a moment here. Okay, we have one member of the public with their hand raised. So this is Mr. Turner. I've unmuted you. You have 3 minutes. Let's try that again. Mr. Turner, I'm unmuting you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you, commissioners. Briefly, I wanted to just commend the commission for its extended amount of great work on the issue of election system security over the past 15 years or so, for pioneering open source elections for the state and for the United States. Although we've seen now the state of New Hampshire go into trial for the open source system that basically the county of San Francisco pushed the development for. and now Mississippi has actually deployed that system. Aside from that, we're doing great work just being part of the leadership, if not in the lead. Hopefully we'll follow those other jurisdictions at this point. And for the commissioners' knowledge, there's a few articles that I think would behoove the commission to be familiar with. One is from the Little Hoover Commission called Making a Good System Better, which is a way of framing the issue around upgrading the system technology so as not to denigrate the current vendors. That's a nice framing job. Also, for anybody that's doubting the benefit of open source, there's something by the Department of Defense. If you Google DoD open source FAQ, there's a frequently asked questions an answer session put forward by the Department of Defense that explains why you use open source for mission critical operations, which we are in agreement with Congressman Slawwell that this voting is certainly mission critical for the United States. And another one by GovTech magazine, which is titled "Are Open Source Elections More Secure?" This is GovTech. Had a 1 and a 2-part series. I was contacted by them and made statement for their part 2, which said basically we are in disagreement with the OSET position of nuancing the license around open source. We stand solidly with general public license software. And finally, self-serving as it is, there is a good documentary on Amazon Prime called The Real Activist. And Vice President
30 seconds.
Vice President Jordanic is in there along with Mayor London Breed and others advocating for open source election systems. Thank you very much for your time tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. I see no other members of the public with their hand raised.
Okay, thank you. I should have said this earlier, I apologize, but with 6 members present and accounted for, we have a quorum. We are awaiting the director who ran to help the commission with something quickly. So I think what we should do is, I guess, come back to the director's report, which is the next agenda item. So I'll close out agenda item number 2 and move to agenda item number 4 in his absence. And then when he returns, we'll come back to it. Does that work for everyone? Okay, great. So closing agenda item number 2 and moving to agenda item number 4, commissioners' reports. Discussion and possible action on commissioners' reports for topics not covered by another item on this agenda, meetings with public officials, oversight and observation activities, long-range planning for commission activities and areas of study, proposed legislation which affects elections, and others. Would anyone like to kick it off? Vice President Jordanic.
Yeah, so I was originally planning to include 2 documents, but I only had time to create one of them. And this is a 1-page memo I wrote with a couple pages of attachments. It's basically a follow-up to our discussion at the last meeting where we talked about the DVS order privacy flaw. And a few weeks ago, I came across a California law that actually says that if a voting system vendor is notified of a flaw in the voting system, then they're obligated by law to notify the jurisdiction within 30 days. And this is a piece of information that we didn't know about last month. So I just wanted to let people know about this law. And I also was wondering if, given this new information, and maybe this is a question for our Deputy City Attorney or Director Arntz, like if there is a possibility that the voting system vendor did not comply with this law, is there any kind of recourse? Like, does our contract require the vendor to follow the law? And is there something that, we could do, in response or anything like that? Are they obligated to, yeah. So I attached to the agenda a document that basically describes the law that I found that seems to suggest that Dominion was supposed to notify San Francisco of this privacy flaw within 30 days. And this doesn't have to be for this meeting, but my question is, if we find, or if there's a chance that the vendor didn't comply with the state law, is there some kind of a recourse, like, or in our contract, is the vendor obligated to follow the law? And if, I mean, if we have a relationship with this vendor and they didn't follow the law, is there something that we can get in return, or how does that work, basically?
Deputy City Attorney Flores, I will take your question and I can have an answer to you by next meeting.
Great, that'd be appreciated. Thank you very much. So that's all I have to report.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanic. And thank you, Director Arntz, for printing everything for us. Really appreciate it, and sorry to make you run around. Does anyone have additional items that they would like to report? Okay, moving right along. So, Director Arntz, just to give you a little bit of insight while you were out of the room, we just popped over to Commissioners' Reports, Agenda Item 4. But if it's okay with you, we'd love to go back to Agenda Item number 3 and kick off the Director's Report.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna, we'll quickly just take public comment on Agenda Item number 4, and then we'll go back to Agenda Item number 3. So.
Okay, there's one member of the public with their hand raised. Mr. Turner, I'm unmuting you. You have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Commissioners. That is startling information and regarding the discovery of the apparent violation of law on behalf of Dominion. It is in keeping with their callous attitude and disrespectful attitude toward the county and the election commission, with their statements in the Examiner and Chronicle saying that the people of San Francisco don't care about elections and that the commission doesn't know anything about elections, and that they consider John Arnst and the department to be part of their well-oiled machine. We reject and resent all that from Dominion. We recognize that the media, strangely, after 2016, the media and the population was not enamored with Dominion voting systems after Trump's election on those systems. In 2020, with the election of Biden, all of a sudden, the Democratic Party, which I'm a proud member, started cheerleading for Dominion, which my memory isn't that short. I remember 2016 and trying to avoid the likes of a Trump coming into an office like the presidency, and then that happened. So Dominion's current public posture is pretty good. They're looking like people enjoy them for some reason. I guess because of the 2020 election, which I understand that short-term thinking, short memory thinking, but we have to be very careful here. And the discovery of this apparent violation of law is disturbing and is substantial and should not be trivialized. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. There are no more hands raised.
Great, thank you. Vice President Jordanik, that we will close out now agenda item 4 and move back to agenda item number 3, director's report, discussion and possible action regarding the director's report for April 2023. And I will hand it over to Director Arntz.
Thank you, President Stone. I take quick questions, but just briefly. So our website is making the change Friday, just as you guys did. And as Commissioner Hayden Crowley knows, it's a lot of effort to make that all happen. So our folks did a really good job. They're doing it a month ahead of schedule. And then all the translations are complete as well, which is incredible. One of the first aspects that will be displayed on the new website will be our Go Green campaign to draw people to move their receiving of voter information, pamphlet information from hard copy to digitized. And also Friday will be the kickoff of the Go Green campaign. We're also going to partner with the Department of Environment and also the public libraries and using their newsletters and also their functions to get the word out to people. There's a mailing or an emailing that'll be going out on Friday from us around 233,000 or something. And also the library has a mailing going out, which they'll include the information about going green. On the library's emailing, a lot of customers, what's the word, of the library are not San Francisco residents. So we're actually in the message, informing people, even if you don't live in San Francisco, to potentially contact your local elections office, because maybe they have a Go Green program as well. So we're trying to wrap other counties as well, and not just San Francisco. Then, of course, Earth Day is on Saturday, so we'll be present down at the Golden Gate Park for the festivities down there. And then just on an ongoing basis, we'll have various rollouts of the digital signs throughout town, the buses. We'll have online ads happening. Then also our information that we'll be sending out as well. So this is just the start, and we'll continue this as we go into the March election. And then also just of note, we have the high school ambassador program started up. And the director's report indicates, I think, 16. We actually have 20 students who are ambassadors. And we'll look to increase that the next time. This is the first time we've actually provided stipends to the students. Then I think it was last Friday, everyone came, the students, the ambassadors, we brought them to City Hall, did training with them, gave them a tour, and brought them down to the office. And then also they have like a mentorship relationship with folks who are part of our ambassador program, where our folks check in twice a week with the ambassadors, see how they're doing, answer any questions that they have, if they need more materials. And that way, we know that they're engaged, and also they know that they're supported as they go through the program. And then we'll look to increase that program as we go into September. Because every April and September is high. You know this, okay? So as we go into September, and then so I think from that I can take questions on the report. But again, just a lot of really good work. Commend a lot of folks in the department for both the website and also for the Go Green program that's happening starting on Friday. So
Awesome. Thank you, Director Arntz. Was that a hand? Oh, Commissioner Parker.
Thank you, as always, for this report, and great to hear all these things going on. When I was looking at the information about the website, and I was just wondering, with the changes in the functionality with the navigation and tables that you described in your report, it seems problematic with the information you all are trying to, but that was just my read. I can't see the wireframes and everything that you all have. Are you worried about that at all on a user experience end? I mean, I can see how it's supposed to be more user-friendly, but it seems challenging.
yeah, so that's something we're still talking about internally, how we're going to present the tables, because not all the content is up yet on our test site. We've got to get that up before Friday. Because one thing to keep in mind is that probably 70% or more of the users use their phones, use a smartphone, not a desktop. So when we use those tables that are on the desktop version or laptop version even, that's not how it's viewed on the phone. And since most of our users are using phones, we'll probably we probably will change the dynamic as far as what the tables look like. You have to scroll down to the bottom of the table and have a scroll bar. You won't be able to do it intuitively. You'll know there's another row once you get down to the bottom of the table. And then also, like, tables may not be the best approach for all information, so then we'll use lists. But the benefit of using the tables and the lists is that these are already hardwired functionalities into the city's Drupal. And so we're not having to do any sort of coding ourselves. And also it opens up to more people in the department who are able to engage and participate in maintaining the website instead of having people specialize and receive training to input information and monitor how the information is appearing across different platforms. Then we know that the city has standardized the presentation of materials using the tables and the list. So it's a simple matter of inputting the data, and then the system takes care of the presentation. So yeah, it's going to be a change, but it's also the change that other departments, including the commission, have to undertake unless we were to try to do something special and then bring it into the site through a link, and that just creates more complexity for us.
Just to follow up to that, do you, so I can look at you with my mic
Yeah.
closer to me. So as you're figuring this out, is there user testing that you all are doing? Like, I volunteer if you need somebody to look and say, can you find what you used to be able to find? But just wondering how you're.
No, we haven't done that yet because we've been trying to
far
move
away.
this forward. Yeah.
Okay.
And then also we still have our SF elections site, which is a separate website essentially that we combine with the SF Gov site. So we still have to go to the SF elections and have that appearance at least be relatable if it can't mimic what the SF Gov site, the graphics are. So no, but certainly, yeah, we'll keep that in mind. If we need some users, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Thank you, President Stone. I would just add, Commissioner Parker, I worked in the whole website space for 4 years in my previous position with the city. And the Department of Digital Services has been testing this concept for the last 6 years. And so a lot of the functionality that the elections department will assume has been tested over and over, and they, am I pronouncing it right? Iterate constantly, and they're constantly. But this is their flat presentation is kind of the latest in terms of offering accessibility to people. I mean, there's lots of criteria that have to be met in order to accommodate people of all different at all different engagement levels, starting with just keeping the language at a reading level that is comprehensible. Also with people that have eyesight issues, not putting anything, trying to minimize the number of capitals and things like that, capital letters, because that is an issue. So just as a reassurance, I know that what you're saying makes total sense, but I would say as a starting point, they have been, testing this and testing this and testing this over at Digital Services for quite some time. And I think they're pretty confident of I'm not using the right terms, but their infrastructure that they have for the website and for the Drupal platform. And we'll see how it plays out when all the departments get folded in. My understanding is that the Department of Health was like the first department. Now, they were going to be the first department to go onto the SF Gov site. I don't know if they have. I haven't checked back in years, but that would be worth looking at to see if they're on, because the Department of Health is the biggest department in the city. So if they're on there, but maybe they're not, so I don't know. Anyway, I do think that provides a modicum of assurance.
Thank you. Vice President Jordanek.
Yeah, thank you for the report, Director Carnes. I have a question also about the website, and it's something that actually I experienced with the commission's conversion. And the commission's website is very heavy on like historical material that goes back years and years, like old meetings and things. And one of my concerns was making sure that we don't lose all that old information. And in terms of the department's website, are there any pages that you have that might have historical information that you might not be converting over and that it will still be accessible via like an archived link?
Yeah, well, for us, for anything that we couldn't bring over to SF Gov, we can put over to SF Elections. So we can link over to SF Elections from SF Gov. So we're not going to lose any archived material.
So like even information that didn't previously exist on SF Elections, you'd actually move it then?
Yeah, it's,
Okay. Like just one example would be like you had a page about the RFP from like 2019. And is that a page that you would be converting over or moving to SF Elections?
if it can, that particular page, I don't know where it is right now, but if it's something that can move with SF Gov, then we just move it over.
Okay.
Right? We're not trying to create a separate site on purpose.
Yeah. And then are there any, as you're going through all the pages, are there any pages that you're noticing that don't apply anymore and you're just going to kind of not convert them or move them? Are there any pages like that?
We're not going to lose any content.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah. Okay. So that's all I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Commissioner Dye.
Thank you, President Stone. Thank you for your report, Director. I was happy to see all the stuff on Go Green in particular, and thank you for looking at all the different messages. I had a couple of questions about the special elections. So it seems like you acquired another one. Are all the special elections done vote by mail?
Yes.
Okay. And about how many voters are in each special election?
The retirement and the retirement trust elections, I think around 35,000. And then the Excelsior Community Benefit District, I don't know. There's probably no more than 200 properties. So I don't know how large. Yeah, it's probably around 200 properties, or so thus 200 voters for that one.
So I actually had a question about the benefit districts. It's only property owners?
Correct.
So would it be correct to interpret that as homeowners, or are they also commercial properties?
And the city. So any entity that has title to property would be a voter in that election.
Okay, great. Interesting. I also read the racial equity report. I had actually learned a lot. And it's a very comprehensive template from the Office of Racial Equity. Curious, there was a reference to moving from a rule of 3 to a rule of 10. I'm just curious what that is.
So when the city administers permanent civil service examinations, when departments when departments interview candidates who made those lists, it depends if there's rules that get applied to who's eligible from those lists to actually be hired. And so often it's the rule of 3, which means the top 3 scores, people who receive the top 3 scores are eligible for positions. And then rule of 10 would be the people who acquired a top 10 score on the examination.
So just to improve the diversity of who gets considered.
Right.
Okay, that was my guess.
Mhm.
Just wondering about that. And the other thing is I would just call your attention to probably starting with the commission section, which is obviously outdated and is going to be updated. But a lot of the appendices refer to, 2021 budget, and it looks like it hasn't been updated in the detailed, not the slides, but the detailed racial equity report. So just wanted to call your attention to that. But the substance looked great.
All right. Thank you.
Is that it? Oh yeah, Commissioner Parker.
Yeah, I had a question about the racial equity report also. I wasn't sure if we were going to cover that right now. 2 questions, actually. It was also great. I really appreciated reading that. And the first question I had is, Is there any data that you have or will be sharing related to some of the outcomes in particular? For example, one of them was having cast a wider net. We successfully reached a wider audience for your, for hiring, received applications from a diverse group of job seekers and met all of the hiring goals. And so I just wondered if you had data about like the diversity of the hires compared to the diversity, demographics of the city, if there was, data associated with that. That's the first question. Then I have another one.
Yes, one of the slides indicates that the DHR will provide the department with.
Oh, okay.
That's the data that the
Got it.
DHR would provide.
Okay. Great. Thank you. I wasn't sure. I did see that initial slide, but that makes sense. And then the other question I had was around the slide about public surveys. And I wondered if you ever shared information like via blog or social media that indicates public feedback that the department has received that you all then have used and addressed that feedback to then make improvements. And I ask that because in my experience with a lot of public agencies and even just organizations, it's such a confidence building exercise to say, we received this feedback, we made this change and see what we did, because what you have to say matters. And we value what you have to say, and we plan to act on all good ideas wherever they come from. And it's just a great confidence building exercise. So that's why I'm asking if you have ever had an opportunity to do that.
We haven't had a program where we explicitly acknowledge a suggestion, but certainly we do take in information and make changes.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that you do obviously take in the information, but if there's ever an opportunity, I would encourage you to do that. I think the public, I know as a citizen with other public bodies, I love it when you hear that, oh, actually it was worth it to take the time to give that feedback, then they can connect the dots. And they know that it was a direct result, of something the public provided. Just helpful when there's opportunity.
I mean, we respond to every email that we receive and every phone call that we receive. So it's not that people are just sending, emails or calling into space. I mean, they're getting contact with the department. And so even if we don't formally acknowledge with some program, and usually people aren't calling to make improvements to the department, they have an issue and they want it resolved for themselves. And so we engage with everyone that emails or calls us on that level. So we have thousands of calls and exchanges that we have each election.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Vice President Jordanek.
Yeah, thank you, President Stone. I just had a follow-up question to one of the questions that Commissioner Dye asked, which was about the election where the properties that are owned by the city are also participants. Like who would cast the ballot for the city in those cases?
It depends. I don't know. I don't know who the voters are in that election. I couldn't tell you. It depends on the entity.
I mean, is it the owner of the property or the people that live there that cast the ballots?
Again, there's too many hypotheticals going here, so I cannot answer your question. Depends who the entity owns the property and how and who votes. So there's so many different situations. I just cannot give you one answer.
Okay, well, then maybe just so I can have a little bit of an idea. Are there cases where like a government employee would cast the ballot for a certain property if it's owned by the city?
Of course.
Yeah. But it might be someone from like a certain department or something.
Right.
Okay, great. That's all I wanted to know. Thanks.
Anyone else? Thanks, Vice President Jordanek. I just had a couple of questions / comments. Around the website specifically, and I think you kind of alluded to this, Director Arntz, about the I have so many papers in front of me. But in terms of the tables and like the actual like visuals of the website, so can you actually explain the difference between the website that you are changing over and the one that will remain like separate from the new design? Because I don't think I caught that. So in terms of, for example, results reporting, will that have to transfer into this new format, or can you just explain that to me? Sorry, I think I wasn't paying attention or I misunderstood.
Yeah, so like the results will be on sfelection.org.
The one that's staying.
Yeah,
Got it.
yeah, because at that we have the ability to have more dynamic
Yes.
presentation of material than we have in SF.gov. And so that will be staying in SF elections.
That was my question. I just wanted to make sure I understood that correctly. And yeah, I mean, one thing I will say, just as a comment to all the other folks commenting, is I have had some, I know that Digital Services does a lot of testing, but I have had some trouble with our own stuff. I mean, I used to use that search bar religiously for the Elections Commission website. And I try to now use the archive one. It's very hard to actually access archived pages. And so it's something just for everyone to kind of keep in mind that those are quite difficult to access. And in the new, on the new SF.gov pages, the search isn't specific to the Elections Commission pages, whereas the previous search bar was only for the Elections Commission. So there will be some things I imagine that drop off, just so, yeah, important to note. The only other question I had about the specifics in the report was just, what is the process of presenting the racial equity update? Do you meet with, and apologies if you already shared this with us in previous meetings, but would you mind just walking through again what the process of presenting the plan looks like?
So if this go around, the departments will send their slides to the Department of Racial Equity.
Yeah.
And then that office will compile the slides, and then this director will, I think next month, will present to the Board of Supervisors a overall equity report for the city instead of departments doing individually.
Got it. So you won't even have to present on it. You just send slides,
Right.
basically, including our slides, obviously.
Correct.
Okay, awesome. Cool. And you'll see on agenda item number 5, we are going to be talking about our slides, but we will get that to you in advance of you submitting as well.
Okay.
And I believe you did answer this question. This is not in your report. It's just a separate question. When are you presenting the budget to the Board of Supervisors again?
It'll be the second and third week, usually, of June. I don't know, but usually it's on a Wednesday.
Okay, cool. I was mostly also thinking of Commissioner Hayden Crowley in regards to the commissioner laptops and when we might have some progress in that information. Okay, that was all from me. Did any other commissioner? I don't see Commissioner Bernholz's hand raised. Oh, it's Commissioner Hayden Crowley, yes.
Are the laptops still in the budget?
They got cut, I'm sorry. No.
They got the axe. Okay, anyone else? Commissioner Bernholz does not have any. Okay, let's move to public comment.
Okay, there's one hand raised. This is Mr. Turner again. You are unmuted, Mr. Turner. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek. Actually, that hand raise was a leftover, nothing to state at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, there are no hands raised.
Great, thank you, Vice President Jordanek. That will close out agenda item 3, and we will move now to agenda item 4, the Budget and Oversight Committee updates. And also Director Arnst, at any given moment, you are welcome to move unless there's a request for his. I know, it's early, 6:45.
That's the biggest smile I've seen.
Okay, thank you, Director Arns. Okay, so let's move to agenda item number 5, Budget and Oversight Committee updates. Discussion and possible action on updates from the Budget and Oversight Committee convening on April 10th, 2023, including but not limited to the Elections Commission's Racial Equity Progress Report to be shared with the Department of Elections and the Office of Racial Equity next month, suggested changes to the Election Commission website, and any other relevant discussions or actions taken by the committee. And with that, I will hand it over to Vice President Jordanek, who is also the BOPEC Chair.
Okay, thank you, President Stone. So what I will do is I will just briefly review the different recommendations we made for each of the agenda items we had, and also very briefly summarize some of the things that we discussed in each item. So we had an item about the Elections Commission website, and during that item, we did adopt one recommendation to the full commission, and this was moved by myself, seconded by Commissioner Levolsi. We voted unanimously to recommend to the full commission that we add a section to our website that contains aggregated demographic information about our membership. So that's something that we could potentially act on as a body today. And we also had as a guest during this item, Amy Martin from Digital Services again, and she spoke with us about, you know, the different possibilities for our website. She also spent time talking about how the new SF.gov website is focused on what are called services, and Director Arns touched on this a little bit. So one of the services that we brainstormed during the meeting is that we could have basically provide information to the public as about how they could present to us at a meeting. So if so we could have like a page on how they would go about that and what's the process. And so that's something that we had asked Amy if it would be helpful to her if we, well, we asked her if she could provide assistance because this is something that's common to all commissions across the city, if that's something they could do, you know, as part of a general citywide strategy. And she basically, she did look into it and then she sent an email that I forwarded on to all of you. It's also in today's packet. But that's something else we could add to our website with their assistance. And so that was, and we kind of just had a little bit of brainstorming around that on that topic as well. I also wanted to just acknowledge President Stone. She submitted different materials for the meeting, and they were very helpful in kind of focusing the discussion because she had a lot of ideas for things under each of the agenda items we discussed. On the minutes, we did have the draft minutes for the August and January meetings, but we did not vote on them yet. But if you're interested in those two meetings, you can see the drafts. We also discussed the process to conduct future annual performance evaluations of the director. And for this item, we also adopted a recommendation. This was moved by Commissioner Hayden Crowley and seconded by Commissioner Levolsi. We voted unanimously to recommend to the commission that we change our evaluation process to basically kind of more align it with the fiscal year. And we would start with pre-planning for the evaluation that would start as early as March. And then it would conclude in a meeting in June of the year that was dedicated just to the evaluation so that it would be ready to deliver in July. So that was a recommendation we made to the full commission. And it would also be useful in terms of the 5-year selection process because it would ensure that we're done well in advance of that. So, and that was something that Commissioner Hayden Crowley thought of. So, thank you for that idea and presenting that. During that item, we also kind of brainstormed a little bit about things we might want to do with the evaluation, like look at perhaps employee turnover, starting with the non-temp employees, possibly doing anonymous surveys, and incorporating some kind of a 360 review. And for these things, Commissioner Hayden Crowley volunteered to start the process of researching those and then come back to us. And Commissioner Parker, your name also came up as someone who might have information about good practices for conducting reviews. And then lastly, we talked, not in this order, but we talked about the Racial Equity Progress Report. And we did vote on unanimously to recommend some slides for the commission to adopt. And again, this was something that President Stone, she did the lion's share of the work on putting a draft together. And we just made 3 small changes to it. And those are summarized in a 1-page document that's part of the packet. We tweaked the wording on one of them and also added 2 bullet points. And then the 2 bullet points were the wording, the final wording was we delegated that to Commissioner Levolsi. So that's incorporated into the slides for us to consider today. So that covers it, I think.
Thank
Thank you for your
you.
patience.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek, for that robust report. That was awesome. And also thank you to Commissioners Lavolsi, in absentia, and Commissioner Hayden Crowley for participating in VOPEC, and it sounds like a very good discussion. Does anyone have any questions or comments they want to add? Yeah, Commissioner Parker?
Thanks. Sounds like you had a very robust meeting. Sounds great. I had one main question related to the racial equity progress report, and this is somewhat from my reference, just because I can see that it was a bit of a carryover from last year to do it again this coming year. But I wanted to understand more what is meant by to remain accountable to a racial equity lens for at least one agenda item every month. I have some thoughts related to that, but I've wondered if you could clarify what that means.
Vice President Jordan, do you mind if I jump in because I drafted that? Yeah, so thank you for that question, Commissioner Parker. So I would say, I don't remember when there's a full timeline that is on the BOPEC packet, but there is a meeting where we discussed this last year at some point, where there was a discussion around having racial equity be more of a prominent feature of our agendas, and less so that it has to have its own specific agenda item, but more so just that we consider racial equity more in some of the policies and discussions that we have. And I'll just speak on a personal level here, if I may, that when I joined the commission a little over a year ago, I had observed at that time that racial equity was not as prevalent of a conversation. And so in an effort to try and have it be more of a conversation, I had asked Vice President Jordan, who I believe was president at the time, if we could have it become more of a standing item. And so that bullet point is just to ensure that we are continuously, if not on its own, talking about how we're working toward some of the goals laid out in these slides. We have other topics that touch on racial equity. So an example of that might be, how are we looking at redistricting and thinking about representation from an equity perspective, but always kind of having at least something in our discussions that is taking racial equity into consideration when we're thinking about the policies and practices of the department. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. Can I share a couple of my reflections on that? So in my experience, to really move the needle on this kind of work, it's really important that it's integrated as opposed to siloed. And what I mean is, I actually am suggesting perhaps we do something a little more ambitious than writing, being accountable for at least one agenda item every month, and try to consistently apply that lens to every single thing that we have on our agenda. And some of the examples you listed are what I was thinking of also. And to me, what that looks like is something more like, what are the kinds of questions we are encouraging ourselves to ask on every item? When we're looking at things like, when we're asking questions, and I think actually in my few meetings that I've been a part of, I am hearing a lot of these questions. Things like which communities are being outreached to when we're hearing the director's report, when we're considering the budget, how are we considering DEIBJ in mind with that? Redistricting, as you just mentioned, the goals that we're setting. I actually think it seems like this group is equipped to take that lens on every single item on our agenda. And so that's my recommendation, is that we're just a little more ambitious than just one.
So I will proactively respond. This is President Stone, and say I wholeheartedly support that recommendation and would very much endorse any sort of action if the commission wants to change that. Does anyone have any response to that? Yes, Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Commissioner Parker said. It's about integration. And actually, as reflected in the other bullet points, our work on redistricting reform, our work with individuals who are just as involved. I mean, many of the things that we're talking about actually, have implications for racial equity. So yeah, I would reword that. I have a couple additional comments on the racial equity report, unless you had something else?
No.
Okay. So first of all, thanks for drafting this, President Stone. I thought it was excellent. I just have a couple of other thoughts on the first bullet for external policies. I think that part of the rationale for opening up a competitive selection process was not just to allow a diverse group of applicants to apply, but also to build a pool of qualified candidates for other senior roles, for succession planning. The way it reads right now, it's like, we did this so that a bunch of people could apply. And, the point is that, one of them, might be successful, but also there may be other roles, like there's been an open deputy director position, for example. So I wonder if we want to just elaborate on that a bit. That was one. And then some of this is just maybe rewording this a bit. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth bullet. It says seeking diverse and more representative candidates. I wonder if we want to say candidates representing the city's diversity, something to that effect.
Which page?
This is on external policy still. Bullet number 5, 1, 2, 3.
Oh, 2022.
Rather than just saying more representative, saying that candidates representing the city's diversity.
This is President Stone. So those two specific, just because you were directing them at me, those actually, I don't recall which, I know one of these, I did not, I think there were edits that were made during
Yeah.
BOPAC, so I might defer.
Sorry.
The second one is the bullet on to our appointing authorities. So that
Where is it?
under external, the fifth bullet.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. So rather than saying more representative candidates,
Oh, we didn't do anything to that.
yeah,
No.
I was just saying to say that we encourage them to appoint candidates that are representative of the city's diversity, just to be more precise about it. And go ahead.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley, would you mind allowing Commissioner Dye to complete her feedback? Yeah.
Thank you. And then on the goals, the third goal, this is just an awkward wording here. It says it's essential that underrepresented communities be given the opportunity to serve as commissioners. I would say individuals from underrepresented communities be given the opportunity to serve as commissioners. The communities themselves are not serving as commissioners. That's just the clarification there.
I'm sorry. Can you clarify that again?
Instead of just saying that the communities would be given the opportunity to serve on the commission.
Oh, that
that's-
individual.
That individuals from underrepresented communities. And I think multilingual is generally one word, but other than that, it looked pretty good.
Commissioner Dye, was that all?
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Thank you, President Stone. The only thing that I think, I didn't really think this through was on, because I was the one that wanted the voted 4-2 to move forward for racial equity and open up a competitive selection. I know that was the rationale for the 4 votes, but I can only speak to my vote. I was not opposed to any kind of racial equity or competitive or racial equity process per se. I voted no because I think that merit needs to be an essential part of why you would remove someone from a position. So I guess the thing that I'm objecting to is because I wanted that information in there that we voted 4-2, it sort of, it does imply that the 2 people who, this is my perception, who voted against this were voted because of the way this is worded, we're voting against racial equity. And that isn't the case. I was not voting against racial equity. And so, but I still, because I didn't vote for it, I don't want the impression given that this was a unanimous position. So I don't know how we fix this, But I agree with your wording on building a successful pool. But the reason this is, I'm just uncomfortable with the way this is worded because it just feels like I voted no and I voted against racial equity when in fact I voted no because I felt that Director Arndt's body of work did not merit his opening up the position. And it wasn't because I was opposed to a policy of racial equity.
I have a suggestion.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley, are you done with your feedback?
I'm done.
Okay, Commissioner Dye?
Yeah, I would just suggest separating it and just saying that we voted 4-2 to open up a competitive selection process for the Director of Elections position. This was in part a move to advance racial equity and allow a diverse group of applicants to apply, as well as to build a pool of qualified candidates for senior roles, future positions, something to that effect.
This decision.
Yeah, this decision was reflected, because I don't think that's the only reason we did it either. So,
Right.
right? So it was something that was considered and it was cited as one of the reasons. But let's not believe the shtick that the media fed us and say it was the only reason. It was not.
So this is President Stone. I have some thoughts on this. I actually didn't include this bullet initially because I actually had I was anticipating this type of discussion. And because we're a diverse body, diverse in mind and in many ways, and therefore it is always going to be challenging to say our vote of 4-2 was one specific thing. And I think we all know that everyone had slightly different reasons for why they did what they did back when that occurred. And I can say specifically, my vote in favor was not about a pool of qualified candidates for the succession plan. I wouldn't support that change. So even though we were on the same vote, we had a little bit of a difference there as well. I do think I can understand all of us wanting our individual rationales to not lose sight of that in the context of saying a 4-2 vote. I do think we could just, I do think we did vote that way, right? We did vote in favor. It was a majority vote. I understand that Commissioner Hayden Crowley, you wouldn't want the perception to then be that those against it, those who were the two that voted against it meant you weren't for racial equity. I do think there is something to be said about, the conversation around merit and whether that in some ways can hinder potential access to opportunity. And I do think that plays into this conversation on racial equity. And I also I think, just to be very clear, this wasn't about removal at least as in my vote. So one alternative could be just to say, we voted 4-2 to move forward, to open a competitive selection process in partial effort to allow more diverse.
Advance?
I'm sorry?
Advance instead of allow?
Sure,
Yeah.
to advance. I don't even know where I was. No, it's no problem. But I think we could just start with voted to open a competitive selection process. And then the second half be in an effort to advance. Is that what you were saying? To advance
Racial equity.
racial equity in.
And allow a diverse group of applicants. Allow for a diverse group of applicants.
Is that also what you were saying?
I would go back to qualifying it and say in part.
Okay.
Which is back to integrating racial equity into everything that we do. So it was part of the reason, not all of the reason.
Yeah.
Right?
I will say, this is President Stone. So I have to be honest. I know that we didn't end up moving this meeting, but I feel slightly disheartened that we don't have Commissioner Lavolsi present, because she is the DEI expert of all of us. And I know that she also participated in this conversation in BOPEC. And so I do think I would, if it's okay with everyone, unless there's additional comments on that specific point, I will go back and
Consult.
edit based on what you have said and make sure Commissioner Lavolsi has a chance to also review and make sure that that this kind of still aligns with the sentiment that I think it will be fine, but just in an effort to ensure that her voice is heard. Commissioner Dye?
Yeah, so President Stone, I understand that maybe building a pool wasn't explicitly part of the vote, but part of the reason I wanted to add that was the way that it currently reads is like we opened this up so people could apply as opposed to like potentially hire. Do you see what I'm saying? It just sounds like we did this so we could have a bunch of people apply. Do you see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So that's why I put that. So it was certainly one of my reasons because, as you pointed out, this was not about removal, and it was quite possible we were still going to vote to renew at that, even after concluding a search process. So for me, it was certainly seeing who's out there, right? We talked about that a lot, just finding out who's out there, and some of these might be young up and coming people who we decide, where it's not appropriate for the director role, but maybe would be okay for one of the, other associate director roles, et cetera. So I don't know how you say that, but I wanted to make it clear that we're not like just doing it for show.
Vice President Jordan, if you don't mind me just responding to that, because it was in response to mine. So, and then I'll just hand it quickly over to you. It makes sense. It's not just for show, and it's not just for, to open it up. But again, I personally did not make that vote in any context other than any other positions in the department. Also, because I don't think it's prudent for the Elections Commission to be seeking candidates that could fill other roles. I think it just toes the line. So I personally, again, that line about succession plan, I'm also, I would personally not want to include that, but I just wanted to respond. I'm fine with tweaking the words a little bit, and I'm kind of drafting something while we're talking based on your feedback, but I just wanted to be clear in my thoughts. So Vice President Jordan, I apologize. I took the floor.
No, that's fine. Thank you, President Stone. Yeah, so I just wanted to just to make clear from before, this bullet point together with the bullet point on the goals that you had commented on, recommend that appointing a third, those two bullet points, the wording was from Commissioner Lavolsi, so I do think it would be courteous to speak with her if we do revise the wording. But in terms of the point you made, Commissioner Dye, about the just giving people a chance to apply, I'm wondering if there might be a word different from apply that might address that concern. Because maybe we could say, I remember one of the phrases we used was to give people an opportunity to compete for a leadership position.
I like it.
And that is more clear that they actually, it's not just they're applying, but they can actually be in the position.
Yep.
And that might be the emphasis might be.
Mm-hmm.
Before I hand it back to Commissioner Hayden Crowley, Vice President Jordan, was there anything else?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
President Stone, you did bring up a good point after I said that I thought that what Commissioner Dye had said was important. But I do wonder, and this is maybe something that City Attorney Flores can comment on, is if we are overstepping our jurisdiction as allowed by the charter amendment. Yeah, I mean, is it overreach to say that we want to develop a pool for succession? That isn't really, it's not in the charter that we're supposed to do that. We do a lot of things that Mayor, I just need to be clear. And I do think that that's something that the city attorney should weigh in on, because if we are overstepping, we need to know that.
Point of clarification, this is President Stone. So I wasn't actually talking about that the succession plan or the pool of candidates were overstepping. I was saying any candidate other than the director's position, because we're not allowed to do anything inside of the department. Our jurisdiction is over simply the director's position. I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't, that I was speaking just about any other positions. I don't think that that's prudent, but I could defer to that. I think we should just remove that entirely, unless Commissioner Dye, you feel that it's important to include that like pool of candidates, but I think
I think building a pool of qualified candidates and just ending it there, because, we have to look at a contract every 5 years. And for someone, for that high level and senior of a role, it's quite possible that someone we liked but didn't grant the position to 5 years ago might be still someone we really like 5 years later. So, and that doesn't imply anything about other roles, right? So I think building a pool of qualified candidates and just end it.
did anyone have
No
any?
mention of succession, no mention of other roles, just simply that part of it is allowing them to, I like what Vice President Jordanik said, compete for leadership and building a qualified pool, right? Something like that.
The challenge I have, this is President Stone, the challenge I have with this language of pool of qualified candidates is, in my mind, and I don't intend this to be rude, but that feels as personally like revisionist history. That is not why I voted in favor of this. It was not looking far ahead. It was specifically, and I actually wrote a full memo about this, that I believe there needed to be more equitable access to this specific opportunity in that moment. And, I do think we don't have to keep going back and forth on just like semantics, but I do think I want to be cautious about us not changing what we voted on. And what we voted on was to open a competitive selection process, and the message we consistently said was to work toward the city's racial equity goals and allow more access to leadership positions. And so even if, there is some gray area of like, okay, well, yeah, there could be, more room for that in 5 years with having that pool of candidates that would apply now, things like that. I do think there's room for that discussion. I just don't think that that was what we voted on at that time. Yeah, Commissioner Dye.
This is a minor point. I was really objecting to this idea that we just open it so people could apply. And I think that Vice President Jordanik's language fixes that.
So just to clarify then, Commissioner Dye, and Vice President Jordanik, so would you mind repeating it? So it's to compete for leadership positions. Can you re-articulate what you said?
Yes, I had said, and there's a part before this, but what I had said was give people an opportunity to compete for a leadership position, but we want to say, people from diverse group or however you want to word that portion.
And I think we had stated before that this was a, highly compensated senior leadership role in the city, something to that effect.
So
Yes, let's not revise. Let's use the language we had before.
So just to repeat one more time, I think maybe a version could be to allow people from diverse backgrounds an opportunity to compete for a leadership position. And then you can wordsmith that.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say allow, but yes. Opportunity or chance or something. Open opportunity is exactly what I was thinking. Got it. Wonderful. Commissioner Hayden Crowley, are you aligned with that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I will, if everyone is comfortable, obviously we still need to consider taking action, but I assume there's general consensus that everyone is comfortable with me just confirming with Commissioner Levolsi offline that she agrees with these changes. Vice President Jordan.
Could you just review what were the changes to the goals again?
I was speaking specifically about just that
Oh.
bullet point. But I think Commissioner Dye had some,
Yeah, it's just a wording. It's essential that individuals
Oh.
from underrepresented communities.
which I think is good. Vice President Jordan, was there anything else, or can I hand it
No,
back to?
thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Can you just restate the bullet point, how you've revised it?
I haven't fully revised it, but I could also confirm with you, because between you, me, and Commissioner LaVolsi, it wouldn't be a quorum. So I could run it by you if you'd like as well, right? It wouldn't be a quorum if I were to run that bullet point offline to Commissioner Hayden Crowley and Commissioner LaVolsi separately. Even if it's just three of us?
It's only 3, though.
Four is.
4.
Four.
Well,
But if the rest of the commission knows about it.
Okay.
Are you leaving the vote in?
I had thought I thought that was
Okay.
what we had planned to do, but
Okay.
do you have
No,
concerns?
no, the only thing, I want that in, or you could, if you wanted to if you wanted to reword it, you could say by a majority vote.
We could also do that.
Yeah.
The thing that I wanted to incorporate from your feedback was that you said in part two.
Yeah.
But if you are now proposing majority vote, as President Stone, I would want to hear what others have to say. I personally would support that as well.
Yeah, as long as there's some reference to the fact it wasn't unanimous. In part two, yeah, works.
Okay.
And you don't need to call.
Okay. You don't want to hear from me?
No, it's not that. I just want to move things along.
Yes. Vice President Jordan, were you going to say something? Okay. So this is President Stone as well. I also agree with the suggestion about adding the word individuals in the goals. I think that is definitely important. And then there was, the one thing that I would like to come back to is Commissioner Parker's comment on the not being limited to just one agenda item. So let's go back to that. So that was in the priorities for 2022 and now in a goals. Was that a goal or was that in
It should be a goal.
it was in the progress.
Yeah, I would leave it as is in the previous one, in the progress, and then change it to integrate it throughout our agenda as a goal.
I'm just making a comment for myself.
oh,
Yeah.
it's it's the second bullet under.
Yeah.
Oh, you found it.
I have it on here, but I'm moving it to,
I mean, it's actually underneath the goals. It's the sub bullet under the first bullet.
You're right.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to.
you were looking at me like I was
Throughout
crazy.
the agenda. Throughout the
Um,
agenda.
Yeah.
Throughout the monthly agenda. Not
Great.
every month, just throughout the monthly agenda.
Mhm.
Okay, so that change plus the language change in the goals, in addition to the bullets in the 2022 progress. Are there any other points of feedback or discussion that the commission would like to have about this document? Vice President Giordano.
Yeah, just on the last page, we neglected this portion during the meeting, but did you have some links in mind on the yellow under resources?
I would like, did I write that? I would include BOPEC reference. Oh, okay, so this is President Stone. So I now am trying, I did this several weeks ago, so apologies, my memory is not perfect. Basically, ahead of the BOPEC meeting, Vice President Jordanek and myself we had individually and collectively done a bunch of work around just tracking the work that the commission has done. Mostly, it's nothing like entirely formal, but more like timelines of when things were discussed. General progress, members of the public, the commission at large can all go view those documents in the packet. There was a suggestion, I guess I suggested, which I'm only now remembering, including some of those documents as a part of our slides, mostly because in the template from the office or from ORE, they suggest including other resources. So that was really just a suggestion, but I also don't think we have to do that. We could also just include the slides that we currently have and not add those links. Yeah, Commissioner Day.
So I have a question. So the detailed racial equity plan that the department puts out that I referenced, so there's a more detailed template for the commission, and that's when I noticed that things looked out of date. So that's, if you look in the 65-page document from the, that's linked to the short slides here, if you click on the detailed racial equity plan, there's actually a template that has to be filled in on, let me see if I can find the page. It's item number 7, which is commissions and boards. And I just want to make sure that we know we're supposed to do that.
This is President Stone. No, I was not aware.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is that this is what got put on the website, and it looked like we hadn't done anything because maybe we didn't know we were supposed to fill this in. So it's not just slides, not just these summary slides, but the actual racial equity report, which is item number 7, like I said, which is, let me see if I can get the page.
Sorry, where is it linked to in the
It's
Oh,
on
your
the first
department.
page where it says, detailed racial equity plan.
Are you talking about the departments?
Yes, the department's one, and
What
and
is the
there's a
page number?
section for the commission. Yeah, I'm trying to find the page number. I keep hopping around here. There we go. Boards and commissions, it's page 55 of the 65-page document.
It's the 65-page document.
So if you go to the short set of summary slides that was provided as a appendix for the director's
The
report,
last slide, there's a hyperlink.
It's
There's a
the
link on it.
staffing plan, though.
that's just, there's a staffing one, but there's also the,
Sorry, the slide before that, it says Racial Equity Action Plan. It's on slide 22.
Robin.
I see it. Commissioner Dye, were you? Oh, this is old. I know this document.
Right.
Yes.
I'm going to jump in and just say that kind of expectation is for commissions that have executive directors and a staff. It's not really realistic for you to have to complete something beyond the slides. We are a volunteer organization. We just got our secretary, and you've done an incredible job with what you've completed. And I'm just going to put it out there that, I mean, I think of the other commissions that I know people serve on. They have executive directors and full staffs who do that. The commissioners do not do this.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayden-Crowley, and also thank you, Commissioner Dye, for directing us to this. If I may, just quickly. So this document, the action plan, the template, so I've seen this. I actually referenced this in the BOPEC meeting of August 2022. Yes.
Yeah.
August 2022. Because the department and departments generally are were required to do this very comprehensive plan in phases which was initially what caught my ear to us not having had one
Right.
when I first brought it up, I think in like almost a year ago, a little less than a year ago. And my understanding is, I think now I understand differently, Commissioner Dye, what you were talking about to Director Arntz about how it hadn't been updated. The director specifically, when he emailed me, said this was what the slides is what we were accountable for. So I personally don't think there's an expectation, but perhaps something we could do is ask the director to link to our slides in here in the area of
Yep.
this extended detailed plan so that we don't run into reporters going around looking and saying, you haven't done anything to, which is what happened, right?
Yep.
When we had done a lot toward racial equity. So I think that's a takeaway is perhaps we're not going to do something as detailed as this, but perhaps we could ask the director to just add a note in there that says the Elections Commission has provided its racial equity action plan here with the link.
Yeah,
'cause-
I mean, I actually don't know that it is a lot more work, except that there's a timeline. Like every bullet could just be a line in this report, but, you know, I think that's a completely reasonable suggestion, is that they simply link to these slides. But given that their slides link to this report, yeah, we either need to get that deleted and put in a link to our slides or replicate it.
Vice President Jordanek, you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Number one, this plan that's being linked to, that's not something that needs to be updated for the current iteration. I think he's linking back as a historical reference. But what I wanted to suggest is that in terms of our current slides, I would be comfortable just like allowing President Stone to just select the documents that she thinks are most relevant among our different agenda packets so that we don't just have an empty resources page. Because I know that we do have a lot of documents that cover different things that we've accomplished. And, you know, one of them was something that President Stone put together for the last BOPEC meeting. So, you know what I'm saying? Instead of having nothing, let's at least link to what we do have.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanek. Does anyone have any other comments? Okay.
For example, you could put the redistricting reform project plan in there as one of the documents.
One for the redistricting project plan to be added as the resource supplement. I'll definitely think about it. We have about 2 weeks. I will get working on this and send it off for reference. Yeah, Commissioner Dye.
President Stone, if you would ask Director Arntz, because he does link to it, this older 65-page plan, it's under his resources. So as long as that link is in there, our data, old data is going to be linked in there. So either he needs to not link to it or he needs to clean it up because also the appendices are out of date.
Thank you, Commissioner Dye. Yeah, I had noted that my takeaway is to ask him to just change that line in the part about the commission, and it'll be updated. Any other points of feedback? I did have one question for Vice President Jordanek, not pertaining to the racial equity plan, but about the website, and this is actually toward all of the BOPEC committee, which is when you voted on the recommendation for the adding demographics to the website, was there a discussion about which demographics?
No, we left it pretty open-ended. I think we did talk about just have it self-identified, but we didn't nail the details down.
Okay. That makes sense. I think we should probably have, and I would be happy to provide a proposal of what that would include. But, you know, perhaps, you know, everything would be self-identified and aggregated, but I do believe we should have some sort of like idea of what that should be, and I'm happy to provide a suggestion. I'm happy to provide suggestions that perhaps we, I don't know, we can vote now on this, or I could provide suggestions that we speak to in the next meeting. But I do think we should have just like a conversation about what those demographics should be. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Dye.
Yeah, I had a question about the website as well. So it's not like the only service you discussed was how to present in front of the commission. Is that correct?
Well, I had also suggested the idea of one of the services be like, how would a member of the public, if they wanted to have a conversation with the commissioner? But I think there was some desire that if they're going to communicate, they should communicate with the whole body. But we didn't discuss, were there other services, Commissioner Hayden Crowley?
I think we were brainstorming what that could look like, but it was, we were having a tough time in the context of the way that the digital services define services. We'd have to go back to that. My brain is very fuzzy on it. Sorry, but can I just revisit the point of the aggregate information?
Yes, I realized that I kind of had been moving outside of some order. Vice President Jordan, Commissioner Dye, was that the gist of your, was there more? Okay, was there more on that specific, or can I?
Yeah, actually, I was I was going to ask. I would think that most services would be informational in nature, and so I was wondering if you guys discussed the special web pages we had talked about that would be topic based.
So the sense that I was getting, we didn't ask this explicitly, but the sense that I was getting is that like information is not a service. So it's more like some kind of activity. But in terms of the policy pages, we did start to discuss like whether we wanted to have some kind of a process or policy around how we decide what to post on the website. And we didn't really come to any kind of resolution. We just sort of started the discussion. So.
And we did put things on a future agenda because we couldn't discuss it all.
There's a lot. There's a lot. Commissioner Hayden Crowley, please pick up what
I do. We did get into a spirited discussion about the racial equity plan in the context of what it meant, because I believe that Commissioner Lavolsi and Commissioner Jordan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, were felt that it was a narrow definition focused on race. And I thought it was a broader, it should be broader to include gender and age and, various different things. But as Commissioner Lavolsi pointed out to me, that it said clearly racial equity plan, but then, sprinkled throughout, it does say diversity, equity, and inclusion. So they sort of use those terms interchangeably. So I just do think as we go forward, we just need to be mindful about what we are specifically focusing on. I thought it should be broader. I think I should speak for Commissioner Jordan, but I am clear that Commissioner Lavolsi felt it should be focused on race. So I would say just going to the aggregate, that might be a conversation.
Point of clarification. So are you talking about the racial equity plan or about the demographics on the website?
I'm talking about both because I want to confuse you as much as possible.
Vice President Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, my recollection of the discussion, we talked about the website before the racial equity item, and I think the website was broader demographics. But when it came to the racial equity slides, that was the case where I think we felt that it was limited to racial equity.
Okay. He's got a better memory.
I will say, Ms. President Stone, I will say, I do take some fall for that because, well, not fall, but in a lot of these efforts last year around racial equity, I specifically was talking about it more broadly as diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, belonging, kind of looking at it from an umbrella. I think racial equity is, principally important, but I think in many different ways, I've brought up efforts around equity to encompass lots of different components of equity. But I think it is an important conversation to ensure that we are being specific to the efforts we're doing around racial equity as well. The office is called the Office of Racial Equity. And so I think we should ensure that we're meeting those expectations of the city and but also have additional efforts that are maybe more broad as well. So in terms of moving forward I think we're pretty set on what we're going to do with the slides. For the demographics for the website, I'll provide a recommendation. I can also speak with Commissioner Lavolsi, see if she has some specific recommendations from her area of expertise. Are there any other comments, questions, points that people would like to bring up? Yes, Vice President Giordano.
Yeah, if we do move forward with the goals as they're proposed today, one of the goals was around recommending to the appointing authorities that they consider, racial diversity. So an outgrowth of that could be, you could ask BOPEC to create a process for that. Like, I was thinking we could have a letter template, and then also, we would insert the demographic information from the website. So that could be like a future task for the committee.
I support that. Do you believe that that BOPEC needs action from the commission in order to do that? Or would you want formal action taken today? In which case I'm happy to make a motion. Otherwise, I would definitely support the Budget and Oversight Committee working on that process and template in its next meeting.
Great. I think that's sufficient.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Can I just add that I know that it's the Office of Racial Equity, but they do, so it's interesting that you apologized for the confusion, because I don't see it as your confusion at all. They put out the information and they interchange it. They use racial equity and they use DEI interchangeably. And they do mean it in a broader sense. And they do mean gender, they do mean age, they mean all kinds of different things. And so back to your point, which I've now, about the letter, if we're going to put something out and we're going to talk about demographic information, I am opposed to limiting it to just race. I just am. I think gender is important. I think age is important. I think there are other things that need to be included in a statistical analysis of our commission, because we comprise a diverse group of folks, and also where we live in the districts. Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Hayden Crowley. I would also argue, which I brought up in the August 2022 meeting, that socioeconomic status is a very important conversation to have. One of the challenges that I find to be very inequitable about San Francisco in many ways is that the commissions are, and most commissioners are uncompensated, which makes it very inequitable for folks of lower socioeconomic status to potentially access these positions for a variety of reasons, which I find to be very disappointing. And we had talked about this in the last meeting. And so I do think in an effort to talk about diversity in multiple ways, I do think socioeconomic status. Now, that said, in this city, socioeconomic status is often highly correlated with communities of color. And so I think that it's not in a vacuum necessarily. But I think to your point, Commissioner Hayden Crowley, doing the demographic information will be really helpful for us in being able to consider how we speak to the letters that we might potentially draft in the future for the appointing authorities. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. I'm just making sure Commissioner Bernholz did not have. Oh yeah, Vice President Giordano.
So for this item, I do feel like we are going to want to move that we approve the slides with the changes that you're going to be working. Are we going to do that today, or
Is there a second?
Second.
okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Can you state the motion?
Yeah, I move that we adopt the draft slides incorporating the changes that we discussed today, and authorize President Stone to submit them after consulting with Commissioner Lavolsi in the final wording.
Okay. Before we move to a vote, is there anything else we need to discuss on this item? I just wanted to kind of do I want to do a quick recap before we move into public comment. So we're voting on, obviously, we will be voting on these slides with the edits. BOPEC will be working on that template based on what we talked about, and I will also provide a recommendation to the commission about proposed demographic, self-identified, aggregated demographic information that could be used as a reference point for the letters. Vice President Giordani?
Yeah, so I guess the other recommendation we made was around the scheduling of the performance evaluation. And did we want to formalize that or just table that for now, or?
I believe that because this is President Stone, because we have not yet completed this performance evaluation, I personally would recommend that if Vice President and Chair, BOPEC Chair, Giordanic, if you don't mind, bringing this back up in our May regular meeting. I think that would be a good conversation to bring up once we've kind of closed out, hopefully,
Okay.
some of that performance. That's my opinion, though. Does anyone
Yeah,
have
that's fine.
thoughts? Okay, perfect. Other than that, let's move to public comment. And this is on the agenda item number 5, Budget and Oversight Committee updates, specifically on the, and also on the motion to adopt the racial equity slides that incorporate potential changes discussed today.
Okay, there's one hand raised. This is Mr. Turner. Mr. Turner, you're unmuted. You have 3 minutes when you begin.
Thank you, commissioners. The public supports the motion naturally, obviously, and just wanted to provide some framing lest we forget the false outrage that occurred upon the mention of racial equity. When this was all initiated, we saw the unusual circumstance of Supervisor Peskin linking arms with Tucker Carlson to say that there was outrage. We considered that a political hit job. It was maybe one of the most uncomfortable, awkward moments that I've seen in San Francisco politics, doing this for 20 years. It showed the power of Dominion and their position to retain John Arnst under any circumstance. And the manipulation of the press was palpable and disgusting, basically. So lest we forget that happened, the political pressure was obvious and disturbing in that moment, and really showed what everyone is up against trying to move toward open source voting. I know open source voting was backseated in the conversation, maybe appropriately in that political moment, but we want to make sure that it is clear that when we talk about equity, this is the purpose of moving toward open source elections. This is to defeat Jim Crow 2.0, and this is why folks like the Medgar Evers family, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Harvey Milk Club, the National Organization of Women, this is why they all stand in support of your work toward open source election systems. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. I see no more hands raised.
Thank you. So let's move to a vote on Vice President Giordanic's motion to adopt draft slides that incorporate, adopt the racial equity draft slides that incorporate changes discussed today after President Stone consults with Commissioner Lavolsi to align changes. So let's move to a vote. Vice President Jordanek,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavolsi is absent, Commissioner Parker.
Aye.
And I, President Stone, vote yes. And the motion passes unanimously with one absent. And so I will move forward with those slides in the timeline necessary to meet the deadline. So that closes out agenda item number 5. We will move to agenda item number 6. Proposed amendments to the Elections Commission bylaws continued from the March 15th meeting. Discussion and possible action regarding proposed bylaw amendments on the commission's remote public participation and parental leave policies. So I'll speak to this quickly. I moved this from the last meeting to today, given that our last meeting was going really late, and I felt that yeah, it was going late. I don't need to share more. So really there are two kind of important things to share. One is that the deputy city attorney had provided guidance on the language for the for specifically around the parental leave policy. This is something that was in an earlier memo from the city attorney's office about these policies that pretty much every commission should have in their rules of order or bylaws. And basically the city attorney's office recommended that those bodies that do not currently have those included into those specific documents should consider doing so. So this is my effort to advance that in partnership with the city attorney's office. The other component of this is just to go along with the decision by the Elections Commission in February to make remote public participation available and accessible at all meetings moving forward as a commission policy. And I specifically thought that it was important to incorporate this into the bylaws. At the time, I had proposed doing that, but did not do my due diligence in reviewing the actual fine print in the bylaws that said that you needed to circulate it in advance of the meeting. So this is my addition. It is on page 6 of the commission bylaws, and it specifically says that the commission shall make accessible both in-person and remote public participation at regular, special, and committee meetings. And then it also includes details about the notice and the information for how to do so. One just quick caveat, and then I'll hand it over to everyone for discussion, is that this is something that may not always be easy and seamless. I had mentioned in the last meeting, and Secretary Davis and I have been discussing this as well, that, I'm hoping that the commission can have a retreat over the summer that will have to be made accessible to the public in person and remotely. So this does have considerations, but I think in the effort to think about broad equity, I think this is one really important way to demonstrate that this is important as a body. So with that, I will hand it over for the body to discuss and then hopefully take action on. Yes, Commissioner Parker.
As I've stated before, I'm in strong support of particularly the policy you were just talking about, and I would just like to move that we adopt both of these amendments to the bylaws.
Thank you.
I just want a clarification.
Yes.
So the hybrid meeting format, it's intended to be part of the bylaws? Because are you saying that it's just a policy, or are you saying that you intended to put a change to the bylaws and didn't get around to it? I wasn't completely clear on that.
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Well, the document we have only mentions the parental leave, and so I'm just wondering where. Oh, keep going.
If you go to page 6 of the bylaws, you'll see in red under section 2B all of that is
Oh,
the
sorry.
proposed changes. No problem. I know it's been a while.
Yes.
I know there is a motion on the floor. Vice President Jordanek.
I second the motion.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
No, I was going to second.
Okay, Commissioner Dye, did you have additional comments that you wanted to make?
I guess my only question would be thinking about special advisory committees in the flavor of the OSTVAC committee that Vice President Jordanek used to head. Would that apply to that?
This is President Stone. So I do recall you had mentioned something about this offline to me, Commissioner Dye, if I may. And actually, I ran this by the Deputy City Attorney, and again, my memory is still a little bit fuzzy. But the rules are actually pretty stringent from the city around advisory, like around meetings of committees, and so you would have to provide, like most meetings have to be in person anyways. You can't really have remote meetings, but I'll defer to DCA Flores to speak to that a little bit, if you don't mind, DCA Flores, just about like the protocol around bodies meeting remotely and whether or not that's an option.
So now that the pandemic is over, we're back to pre-pandemic things. So if this body wanted to have a remote meeting, they would have to abide by a very stringent set of criteria, which would mean if you wanted to be remote, you would have to, and you haven't applied for an accommodation, you would basically have to, wherever you're meeting from, you would have to allow the public to go there to meet with you as well. So there are just a number of things that would be difficult to accomplish, hence why no one was virtually meeting remotely before the pandemic. So all of those special rules we had during the pandemic are now not in existence. So all your meetings must be in person unless you have an accommodation.
What? Oh, go ahead. Commissioner.
Yeah, so in particular, I was wondering about an advisory body where, for example, in the open source one, the technical advisory committee, there was only one commissioner on that in that group.
If you individually as a commissioner wanted to meet anywhere with anyone, you can do that. If it's not a meeting of this body, then yes. If you are going to have a committee, I don't know if you're trying to make a distinction between committee and advisory body.
Yeah.
I don't think that, so an advisory body would not be,
Subject to these rules.
it wouldn't be a meeting of this body.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's what I wanted to
So-
clarify, because it says regular, special, and committee meeting. So if it's not an official committee, that's a part of this body then. If
Yeah,
it-
no,
if
so
it-
if you're just doing this on your own and you want to hang out with a bunch of folks and have a meeting about things, you're more than welcome to do that, and the Brown Act doesn't apply to, but if it's a committee of this body that is being sanctioned by this body, then you have to abide by the Brown Act and also by the in-person meeting requirements. I don't know if that explains fully.
This is President Stone. Thanks, DCA Flores. I believe that if there are task forces or advisory committees, those should all have access. So I think perhaps if I recall, your concern was meeting in person. You don't mind the remote access, it's the in-person. My understanding, and we've gone back and forth about this, but my understanding is that the rules around even the advisory bodies from I think it was like February 10th memo, February 10th, is that a fair understanding? Is that you would have to, even if you did have those meetings, if it's an advisory committee, you would have to provide, even if you do them remotely, you still have to provide access to, let's say, your home. So like we had talked about this with BOPEC, and BOPEC, there was a conversation, oh, you could do it remotely. However, you have to give members of the public access to wherever you're taking it remotely. So if it's at your house, people have to have access to your house. So, but an alternative could be, you could do it at a coffee shop. And that would give access to the public.
I think it's back to what's an official extension of this body because it's an official committee. Yeah, we had that same issue at the state level because when we were no longer meeting all the time, we had people who wanted to meet remotely, and yes, they had to post notices and let people into their home or find a public location for it.
Okay, cool. So that means does that mean you're in support of the committee meeting thing, or, okay, cool. Does
So
anyone,
Oh, my apologies, just to chime in, so that everyone is on the same page. So the rules pertaining to advisory bodies, if they'd like to meet remotely, meeting agenda must be posted at the teleconference location. The meeting agenda must identify each teleconference location. Each teleconference location must be accessible to the public. Members of the public must have an opportunity at each teleconference location to directly address members of the policy body. A quorum of the members of the policy body must participate in the meeting from teleconference locations within the jurisdiction. All votes taken must be by roll call. The technology used for the teleconference may be audio only or both audio and visual. So again, we advise that if it's a meeting, advisory body, committee, or whatever you want to call it, it's a committee of this body that, these requirements are very stringent to follow. So therefore, no remote meetings.
okay. If there are no other comments from commissioners, let's move to public comment.
So I do not see anyone with their hands raised.
Okay, great. Let's vote on the motion, and apologies, who made the motion? Was that Commissioner Parker? Okay, and we'll now be voting on the motion, on Commissioner Parker's motion to adopt the proposed bylaw amendments. Vice President Jordanek,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavolsi is absent, but Commissioner Parker.
Yes.
And I, President Stone, vote yes. And the motion unanimously passes. Apologies, there is some cricket sound happening somewhere. That's very funny and distracting. The motion passes unanimously with, one in absentia, but of those in attendance. And the proposed amendments to the Elections Commission bylaws have passed. Thank you all. So that closes out agenda item number 6. Let's move to agenda item number 7, possible closed session concerning Director of Elections 2022 performance evaluation continued from March 15th. So first, we're going to start with public comment on all matters pertaining to the agenda item. And apologies, that should say 7, not 6.
Okay, I see one hand raised. Mr. Turner, I'm unmuting you. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, commissioners. I'll be very brief. Obviously, the public objects vehemently and strenuously to the apparent automatic reappointment of Director Arnst. Under the circumstances, he's provided disinformation to the Secretary of State. His gone out of his way to be less than forthright to the commission over the years, has personally blocked, we believe, the 15 years of work to move toward open source, and is directly responsible for San Francisco County's inability to move toward open source, which has affected the state of California and their ability to move toward open source. Now we're seeing the outflow of 15 years of work done within San Francisco County, the missing monies that happened that were allocated and then dismissed during the COVID crisis through Linda Jarrell, and all the bad press about Dominion being disrespectful to the county and no accountability. It's just, I mean, we haven't seen ballots in the bay during his shift, and I guess that's his big point of strength. And he paraded all his employees to say how great he was. But aside from that, he's functional, but there's no leadership there. And this was a moment that cried out for leadership. So, under that framing, we think it's best that he's replaced. However, since that's not going to happen, obviously, as the political pressure from Dominion in concert with Aaron Peskin came in to save him, we just want it firmly on the record that the public objects, and we can do better than this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner. There are no more hands raised.
Okay. So let's take a vote on whether to meet in closed session to consider 7D yet to move into closed session. Vice President Jordanic,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Yes.
Commissioner Parker,
Yes.
and I, President Stone, vote yes, and Commissioner Lavolsi is absent. So we're now going to move into closed session, and we will return back into open session. Oops. Yes, sorry, we're moving into closed session at 8:01 p.m. Thank you, everyone. The time is now 9:06 p.m. and we have reconvened in open session. We are now going to discuss and vote pursuant to Administrative Code 67.12A on whether to disclose any portion of the closed session regarding 7D. I'd like to take an action.
I move that we disclose no portion of the closed session discussion.
Second.
Okay. We don't need to take public comment, correct? Okay, on the motion to not disclose any portion of closed session, Vice President Jordanic,
Yes.
Commissioner Bernholz,
Yes.
Commissioner Dye,
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley,
Yes.
Commissioner Lavolsi is absent, Commissioner Parker,
Yes.
and I, President Stone, vote yes. The motion unanimously passes with one absent. And we are not going to disclose anything. Great. So with that, we're going to close out agenda item number 7 and move to agenda item number 8, Redistricting Process Initiative, discussion and possible action regarding the Commission's ongoing redistricting process initiative. And I will hand this over to Commissioner Dye.
Thank you, President Stone. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review the documents that I sent out last night. We basically took all the feedback that we heard from the commission, concerns about our capacity as a commission, given a bunch of competing priorities and lack of staff resources. And what we heard from you is that we needed to go out and get our legislative champions and punt this to the board as quickly as possible. So that is the updated plan that we have presented to you in version 5 of our plan. So all the changes were basically on a couple of pages. So you'll see a revised schedule, and based on suggestions from some of the public commenters at our last meeting, and to give us flexibility, we have basically asked for some volunteers to help us refine our final set of recommendations. So if we put this blue ribbon good government panel together, consisting of the folks listed on the top of page 5 of the plan, including members from California Common Cause, the League of Women Voters, and Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus, as well as a former member of the Redistricting Task Force this last time around. And they have kindly agreed to do the heavy lifting and review what the implications might be of AB 1248, which we learned about in our last meeting with Nicholas Hydorn. And also, there's another bill that we discovered, which is AB 764, which basically is a result of the report that you guys all read, The Promise of Fair Maps, which is designed to strengthen the Fair Maps Act of 2019. So this advisory panel is planning to review that and give us their feedback on what it might look like if we allowed ourselves to fall under these proposed bills. And then where we might run into trouble. And I can tell you one thing that we're going to look at is this issue of random selection versus explicit, vetted selection. But the first thing I've asked them to do is to imagine what it would look like if we decided to adopt all of the provisions in 1248 and basically strike all the existing language in the charter. And would that get us, 80, 90, 100% of the way where we want to go? So, so with the commission's permission, this advisory panel will crunch through this, come up with some options, give us pros and cons, so that the commission itself can deliberate what the final package might look like. And meanwhile, we went and approached some supervisors. And when I say we, I mean Commissioner Parker. So I, of course, have been speaking with President Peskin, but after some discussion, we decided to also approach Supervisors Melgar and Dorsey as well. And they are both considering possibly co-sponsoring this. And Commissioner Parker, do you want to say a little bit about your initial conversations?
Sure. Excuse me, sure. I think, of course, don't want to get too much into detail because they're considering, and I think they're talking with staff, but the initial response was positive. The idea that this is getting San Francisco in alignment with best practices was really resonated with them. They said, why would we not want to do this? When I talked about the goal being that we have 11 co-sponsors from the board putting this on, as well as the mayor, that it would be a no-brainer sort of a measure if we do the groundwork. They were all excited about that. When we talked about, AB 1248, just general recommendations, there was, and I believe that President Peskin also shared this sort of a view, is that let's try not to stray too far from recommended priorities from the state and make San Francisco too special. We get into trouble sometimes when we try to be too special. So there was that general sentiment. And yeah, I think there was just generally enthusiastic response and not a lot of barriers that seemed to cross, but they wanted to have their conversations also, internally. So we're a bit on hold just to see what other questions come up. But I think the hope would be that we have a great trio of co-sponsors who will lead hearings and really take the baton and run with it. And it leaves our plates, and then, and that we are able to get support for something that feels like a no-brainer sort of a measure from the rest of the board and the mayor. So.
Yeah. So if you look at the schedule, basically, we'll give the advisory panel some time to deliberate and present us some options. I think that we can provide, at least kind of consensus recommendations at the next meeting, and maybe if necessary, if we still feel like there's additional time, that maybe a set of more detailed recommendations that we need to debate a little bit more at the following meeting, that would still give the commission, 1 or 2 meetings to deliberate if it really takes that long. And then we'll pass it over to our legislative sponsors, and hopefully they will have committed by then. And then they will need to introduce it by September. And then it would go to committee with the idea that they would have at least we're going to recommend at least a couple of community input hearings. But the reason we've involved the folks that we have in this advisory panel is that hopefully we'll get the full endorsement of all of these organizations. So the good government groups will also be co-sponsors.
So did you decide on this panel?
What,
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. We'll let Commissioner Dye finish and then I'll pass it over to
Yeah.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
But to address your question, Commissioner Hayden Crowley, these were the same organizations that have been monitoring the process this whole last time, and they've been at our meetings, for observing us and adding public comment. And basically, we asked the League of Women Voters who were on the call last time, I asked them straight up if they would be willing to do this, and they said yes. And then I went ahead and reached out to the executive director of California Common Cause and was happy to find out that they just put on a new voting rights and redistricting program manager. She literally just started like a week and a half ago. And so he signed her up for that. And then I reached out to Sietse Goffard, who is the person who replaced the speaker that we had from Asian Law Caucus during our educational phase. And he was happy to join. And then we just rounded it out. We figured it'd be good to have a former member of the redistricting task force. And Chema actually was the author of what I call the minority report of the folks who did not vote for the map. And so he agreed it would be healing to be part of this. So anyway, they have all volunteered their time and are willing to meet several times to hash this out and help guide us and make a set of final recommendations that hopefully will give us all the confidence to move forward and pass it along to the board. Just a couple other comments. Supervisor Dorsey is chair of the Rules Committee, so that it will have to go through the Rules Committee. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to seek his sponsorship. And then Supervisor Melgar is from the west side, and there was definitely a west versus east dynamic during the public input hearing. So we felt that was important to get representation there. And President Peskin pointed out she's also not on the budget committee, which is really important because any public hearings, if they have to start, their staff needs to get started and doing outreach and all that, that might happen during the summer, during the budget hearing. So I wanted to just get some feedback and see if everyone is comfortable with this direction. And then if so, we will come back, with, at least the kind of response to some of the pending legislation at the next meeting. And if we can get it all done, we will try to, but it might take us a couple meetings to get all the recommendations in front of the commission.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
So did you run the panel by Supervisors Melgar, Dorsey, and President Peskin?
We didn't know exactly who was going to be on, but we told them the organizations that we were seeking out, and they were.
I'm just going to throw a little. I would get somebody from labor on there if you want to build support.
I'm pretty sure Chema is involved with that group, but I will ask.
I don't know.
Yeah,
But look at the Labor Council and the building trades. One of their people. Okay.
I believe Chema is a political organizer for us.
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Or local 21.
She is Chema he or she?
He, yeah.
Are they? Okay, so is he on the executive board at the Labor Council?
I don't know about that, but I know he's involved.
Well, check that out. Make sure that person's on the executive board.
Vice President Jordanek, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. With this advisory committee, is this like an official?
It's a task
position?
force. It is not official.
So it's sort of like an external to the government. They're just, okay.
Yeah.
So in particular, they don't need to follow the Brown Act. There's, okay.
Yes.
And are-
And we can meet remotely because California Common Cause is, Russia is in LA. So,
Okay, but it says we have assembled. Is that you and Commissioner Levolsi? or-
correct.
Okay. And then my other question was about the letter, the draft letter, and I actually was very intrigued by this AB 1248 from the last meeting. So I actually met with Jen Say and Lauren Girardin.
Great.
We met for like an hour and a half to talk about 1248. And the thing that was not clear to us, unless I misunderstood our conversation, it wasn't clear which parts of the bill would apply to San Francisco and which wouldn't. And it seemed very like it's like a technical legal question in some cases. Because for example, if parts don't apply to San Francisco, then I think it might actually, we might want to request amendments to AB 1248 so that if it could be tweaked so that it does apply, that would be more useful for us. But I think it would be useful to know prior to sending the letter, like which parts definitively do or don't apply to San Francisco. Do you understand my question?
I do. And there's also, it has a different process for a city and a different process for a county, and we
Yes.
have both. And actually, this is the reason I requested a legal analysis from DCA, Flores, and Rusi, and they're still working on it. So I think really what we're going to, I mean, whether it applies or not, this letter of support is meant to just indicate that we support the general provisions of this. I mean, like I said, some of the details are, you know, who would be the appointing authority and things like that. And even so, they give you multiple choice. They give you many choices.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Vice President Drodonic.
So I guess the issue would be though, like this is sort of like our one shot to kind of influence the bill. And if there was some tweak to the bill that would cause a section to apply to us, I mean, I feel like it would be good to know that beforehand, or otherwise we'd have to write a second letter saying, oh, by the way, we actually want this tweak or something, you know, because I mean, do you know, like from reading it yourself, do you have a sense for which parts do apply and don't? Or are you equally unsure?
So I'm not a lawyer, which is why I asked for the legal analysis. So maybe we should defer to DCA Flores to respond to this. But the way that I read it, it specifically did not exempt San Francisco. It is written very specifically to sweep up all charter cities, over 300,000 people. So as far as I can see, we would fall under the provisions unless we complained about it. That San Francisco also would not be exempted because we have a political appointment process. And so it says if you have an existing independent commission, but it has a political appointing process, and you have to fall under it as well. So everything that I read in it says that they intended for us to have to comply.
Okay, yeah, I was hearing conflicting things from others on that, but yeah, it's fine.
This is President Stone. Actually, sorry, Vice President Drodonic, did you have more you wanted to add? So I just wanted to jump in on that letter and then also a couple other things. So personally, I don't think that we should send that letter just yet. I think we need to wait until we have some more guidance. I think I would imagine the commission agrees on that. mostly until we see the analysis and also have more insight from the task force, which I will come back to. But I think either way, I would probably want to change some of the language, similar to how Vice President Jordanek and I have been working on some of the other letters pertaining to the devious order flaw from the last meeting. So just something to put in the back of the mind there. So I really appreciate the updated like thoughts around this, and especially the efforts to invest in finding legislative sponsor, like actual having supervisors sponsor. One question I have, which we don't have to answer right this second, I'm going to run through a few things, is what the next touch point is with the supervisors, because it's nice to hear that they are like, supportive, but politics we're still in San Francisco. So I think, what's next, what's the next step with them is something I'd like to understand. The other thing I was kind of unclear about is the public hearings. And so you did clarify, Commissioner Dye, that would be all through the soups and not through us, which is, I think, a relief personally. Not that I don't think it's super important, but I actually think we'll get more community participation if done through the soups. But I was confused just a little bit about the outreach plan in terms of is that just us trying to, show support for the hearings? The one on page 6, is that just,
Yeah.
an additional thing? We can come back. I'll list my questions. We can come back to each one of these. So the goal of those outreach things, because I definitely have some more detailed thoughts on that outreach plan that I shared a fair amount of my thoughts via email already, which is resources, capacity, time, people taking,
Yeah,
who is
not
doing
a-
these things. Cool.
Yeah.
Love to hear that. And then the last was about this task force. There are two things about that. So I was slightly disappointed to see that this advisory committee was already assembled, because the commission specifically in the last meeting said that we were not voting on that. And per our bylaws, which I believe I mentioned last time, we do have to vote on that. I think it's amazing that there is so much momentum and support and passion for putting this advisory committee together. But I think that it is in the best interest of us to, when we say, when we're talking about these things, that we said we're not going to move forward with voting on this today. We want an updated plan, and then let's talk about it. And I believe Vice President Jordanek specifically talked about his experience and how much work it was doing the task force, and the fact that there's already kind of bones to who's on it and people already doing work on it. You've already established the committee at that point. It's not, you don't, it says we assembled, and you already have the people who agreed to it, which I think did go against what the commission said. So I just wanted to put that on the record. The other thing I wanted to ask is, and by the way, that is not to say that these individuals aren't phenomenal. They're all wonderful and are very credentialed. So it's not personal. It's more just, making sure that the way that commissioners operate is based on how the entire body has agreed and voted on, something I think that's important. The only addition I would add to that is, you will not be surprised to hear this, that I want to make sure we have community participation in this panel and not just, the experts. I understand that these folks have, like I said, amazing credentials, but we had so many people in the public who were passionate, who showed up to every single meeting, who were just members of the public who cared. And I think we have to include community groups in this panel discussion, because otherwise, for lack of a better term, it's an ivory tower. And I think we have to have people, especially if some of these folks don't even live in San Francisco. We need members of the communities who are most affected to be participating in this panel from the get-go. That is my strong belief. I am just one person, but that is my strong belief. And what was I going to say? The labor task force, communities, Oh, shit. Sorry, excuse my language. I think it's just, I would encourage you to consider maybe doing some, asking some of these groups or, I know someone called from SF Rising last month, asking them if they know people who might want to join, just to get some people who are just passionate about redistricting from the public to participate on the advisory committee, since the work they're doing is, that you all will be doing is so important. I think that was it. So I know that was a while. I think Commissioner Dye, you were going to respond to the question about hearings. Oh, the next touch point on the soups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a lot, but yeah, we were going to circle back with them because we wanted to give the supervisors we approach a chance to talk to each other and decide who's going to run point and all that. So next week, I think we're planning to, is that right, Commissioner Parker?
Yeah, I sent a follow-up to them yesterday with some more details. A lot of them have been out of town, and I do know they want to all touch base with each other again and decide who on their staff would be taking the lead on this. So I sent a follow-up yesterday and had a little bit of exchange with them. So if I haven't heard back by next week, I'll check in. But the expectation when I spoke with them was not forever. It was, I did, say within a couple of weeks, and they said yes. And so hopefully we'll have more on that soon. And I am planning on reaching out to the mayor's office in the next few days just to start that conversation so they're not surprised by anything either.
Yeah. And then just to clarify, the proposed outreach plan has not changed from the last thing. So the recommendation I heard, I believe from you, President Stone, was that we hand our outreach plan to the supervisors. But I'm sure they're going to have their own ideas and their staff is going to have their own plan. But, we wanted to share what we had thought. And so I have not changed anything from page 6 on. In fact, the questions that we had put together on page, the bottom of 6 and 7, those could change too, especially if we have much more explicit recommendations by then that we don't need to ask these questions. So we would defer to the staff of the legislative champions on what they want to do. Of course, we're going to plan to stay in touch with them and see what they're going to do and be in conversation to make sure that whatever is the final ballot measure is something that we'd all still support. I guess the other comment I wanted to make was maybe I misunderstood, but my understanding, because I asked for the commission's support on moving forward with this, my understanding at the end of the last meeting was putting together not a subcommittee of the commission, but in fact an informal task force of people who are not on the commission was the preferred approach. So that's what I did. That's what I followed through on.
So this is President Stone. It's kind of a moot point at this point. However, I did go back and rewatch the meeting because I knew that this was happening after the meeting. And I specifically said the commission did not vote to move forward with a task force. So just for the record, we specifically talked about it because Vice President Jordanek said how much work it was when he had done it. And so what the motion was, and to be fair, Commissioner Dye, there was a lot of back and forth. I can understand where it maybe, I can see where maybe there was ambiguity because there was a conversation about the task force. People seemed to be interested in that, but then we kind of came back and said, well, that's a lot of work and there's still a lot to discuss about this. But ultimately the vote was on just a new plan. But I think at this point, like I said, it's moot. You've done great work. I don't want to undermine that. I just was surprised when I saw this, that the people had already, this was already in motion. And especially because our bylaws specifically say that the commission has to vote by majority on this. So it is, it's moot, it's moved forward, but I also can understand where there was the confusion. I think just for all of us, I also, as president, can do a better job being better about when we have specific actions taken, explicitly repeating what the motion is that we're voting on and what passed. I think I haven't always done a great job of that, so I can take the responsibility for that as well. But if you do look back after watching kind of the discussion, we did say it. Either way, I still want someone from the community. That's still, yeah.
Okay, so, so we did have a discussion about it, and in fact, I specifically spoke to someone from San Francisco Rising, and they didn't want to be a part of it. So the feeling was they wanted this to come from good government groups. And the concern, they were worried about the political things of who's going to be included and who's not, if we have to start picking community representatives. And in fact, I specifically asked some Latinx and Black organizations, and they basically said no. So, I mean, part of it is a capacity issue. So I think that they'll be happy to comment on things when the community input hearings are held. I think that there's a lot of confidence in these groups because they monitored the entire process last time and wrote letters to the commission and to the redistricting task force. So that was discussed. In fact, as we were even trying to figure out who else could do it from these organizations and commit to it, there was a lot of brainstorming on what groups we could involve. And I think ultimately the decision was to keep it relatively small so that we could get through it and still have a chance to make the March ballot. So just so you know, there was a lot of discussion about it.
I appreciate that, Commissioner Tai. Thank you. Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
So I just looked up this Assembly Bill 1248, and it looks as though, unless I'm reading this wrong, I clicked on sponsors. There's only 2 sponsors on the bill. That does not bode well for the bill.
Yeah, it may not pass, but the point is that regardless of whether it passes or not, they have put in all the best practices that we are talking about. So even if it doesn't pass, it might be a model for our legislation.
Okay, I just want to, because I think as you're moving with the Board of Supervisors, it would be helpful if Phil Ting and Matt Haney were sponsors on the bill.
Right.
Because you could go back to the Board of Supervisors and, and to get Scott Weiner involved in it as well.
They're on our list.
So, particularly if you're trying to work with the Board of Supervisors on it. I guess I'm not, because I didn't read this whole thing, I'll be candid. I started a new job, so my time is like really compromised. But this task force, first of all, I did just look up Chema,
Yeah,
not on the executive board of the Labor Council.
probably
So
not.
I would recommend that if whatever you do with this task force, which I don't know what their role is, but that you do have somebody that is on the executive board of the Labor Council, that would be very important for you. But I don't know what exactly the task force is going to do, because in my mind, this is hopefully going to be a board thing, and this is going to be their job. The task force would be, maybe I view down the line as like endorsers for this, would be pushing the campaign.
So just to clarify, the role of the task force is simply to advise us.
Oh, okay.
Their job is to basically do what I had originally wanted a subcommittee to do, of a committee of 3 commissioners. And what I heard last time is we didn't want to form another committee, and, could we accomplish it another way? And this was the suggestion, which I thought was an excellent suggestion, and they're willing to do it. And so they're, like I said, going to do the heavy lifting and debate things, and then come back to us with pros and cons, hopefully in a simple table that we can just say, we agree, or we have some questions, and will help our deliberations to move faster.
I would also think that they could help you in terms of securing the political support you need at the board. That's the number one thing that you need, because you need the board to do this.
Yeah.
Not us.
And in fact, I was keeping Commissioner Parker updated every time someone said they were willing to do it. So it was very clear, like, who else is going to be working with the Elections Commission to jointly present this to the board. And, again, it's helpful if we get all of them to sign on and we, accept their final recommendations or with some tweaks, and they sign on, then we can say, not only does everyone on the Elections Commission endorse this, these organizations endorse it too. And that's the idea.
Yes, Vice President Giordano.
So just to clarify, has this body like already started meeting? Like, are they actually formed now?
I'll need to come up with that clever acronym.
What's that?
Fierce. Fair, independent.
Oh, so they
effective
did
redistricting.
meet already.
Just to
Okay.
meet because, they hadn't met each other, right? I
Okay.
mean, some of them had, but the others
Yeah,
hadn't.
I mean, I just want to also, I guess it is water under the bridge now, but like, I think my recollection too is that we had a discussion about it and it seemed like people were leaning towards having an external body. I think maybe what I was kind of expecting was that at this meeting, you would come back with a proposal to form a body like what you've formed, but now it's already been done, so there's no chance to like influence how it's being structured, I guess. I think, I'm just, that's, like I said, it's water under the bridge now, but I think that was maybe what the issue was. For, you know what I'm saying?
I'm happy to take additional input, but like I said, we actually had some discussions. I had some initial discussions with the representatives from the League of Women Voters who attended our last meeting. And remember, I asked, would you be willing to volunteer on this? And they said yes. So that's how it started.
Yeah, I mean, I guess an alternative would be, during the meeting and say, I have these 6 people in mind. How does the commission feel about creating a body based on these 6 people or whatever? You know what I'm saying? That's the.
If you don't agree with it, then we can, I mean, like I said, we haven't done anything yet. I only, recruited people and then asked them if they were willing to serve and had an initial meeting to people to say hello. We have not done anything, so there's still time.
Okay.
Is there, Commissioner Parker?
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things that I had written down in response to reading all of this, which I appreciate Commissioner Dye and Lavolsi for working on all of this. In response to one question that there was about the good government groups, when I've talked to the supervisors about supporting this and sponsoring it and have brought up some of the groups, who've been coming forward and I've also asked them if there are other groups they thought should be included. And they haven't had suggestions so far, just that could be good information for you all that, making sure that that we all are aware of what other good government groups they think should be involved in this kind of early on, and they didn't have other suggestions. But anyway, but questions that I had. I do appreciate this approach more, this revision of the plan, because I think allowing supervisors to be invested earlier in this movement will lead towards a better process and more inclusive process, as you've talked about, President Stone, making sure there's more access for the community to know that that the process is happening, that they can give feedback. So I think it's great to have the supervisors brought in and invested in a significant way earlier in this process. And, we'll see if March is possible. I have my questions whether it's possible, but we'll see what they can do, because it'll be in their court, not ours. And let's see, a couple of notes. With the letter, I think I had some edits on the letter also. And I actually also agree that it would be good for us to have the analysis before we send it. And then whenever we're ready, like I can hold my edits to that letter until later. And then just related to this whole conversation we're having around the committee or the task force, one thing that I wonder, just kind of even in the language in the plan, was, and I was looking back at my notes and I thought that I took pretty detailed notes from our last meeting, and I just couldn't find the exact thing. I didn't go back and watch the meeting, and I had been looking, when I was reading all this yesterday, and wondered, is there, DCA Flores, like, whether we call it a committee or a task force or a panel, or like, I even had questions about, does it matter if it has a name like that as in regards to Brown Act regulations or anything like that? And my recollection had been, you can have informal conversations, but no official committee. But I couldn't find in my notes, and I didn't have time to go back and look. So that's my only recollection. But I do have the actual question about what is called, does that matter at all? Or is it just that it's not an actual subcommittee of this body, that it has to follow those regulations?
I don't think that the name necessarily dictates what kind of body it is, right? You can call it a committee, but if it's not sanctioned by you, then they can be a committee if they'd like, right? But they have no authority under you. The only issue is that we were going, as I remember, Commissioner Dye was going to come back with a proposal. And then when she submitted that proposal, we were going to evaluate whether we could go forward with the meetings under the Brown Act or not, and who wanted to participate on the committee, on the commission. And all of that hasn't been done. So I can't give you a straight answer without knowing what direction the commission wants to take this committee in.
And so if the committee, I know we're just, pausing on everything that's happened. If we were to bring this back and officially form or vote on the committee, then it would then be under the Brown Act as voted?
No, so I think Commissioner Jordanek had this question, and I think I followed up with him after the meeting. You can advertise the committee meetings on your website, but at no point can 3 of you be present, or more of you for that matter as well, because then you will have violated the Brown Act.
Right.
So yeah, you can definitely, if the commission wants to adopt this committee or sanction it or approve it, you can do that, but at no point can 3 of you attend these meetings. And more than 3 would create, 4 would create a meeting, 3 would create an actual committee. So that's why, if Commissioner LaVolsi and Commissioner Dye want to do this, that's less than a committee. They can go forward and do this. You can advertise it on your website, but at no point can any of you join this.
Point of information. And actually, I don't even know if this is a point of information. President Stone talking here. Something that made me think of this is also just, who's going to be drafting the insights of the panel, and how is that going to be presented to us, or the advisory committee? Because, personally, I don't want to join these meetings, but I do wonder how information is going to be disseminated to us, and to ensure that there's consensus amongst that group, and how will it be, how will the committee, and then I think I put this in my feedback as well, how will it be governed? And I do believe that there needs to be some transparency to the commission about that, in terms of how they're governed, how you're governing it, and how, are there going to be minutes taken? Is it going to be recorded in some way? Who's going to be responsible for the deliverables? I think in theory, there's so much good that could come out of this body, but there are a lot of unanswered questions I have. And I do think that in the spirit of being accessible and transparent with the public, if it's all happening out of the public, I may have some concerns about that. So I apologize. I think I interrupted actually Commissioner Parker, now that I am thinking about it. So I'll hand it back to you.
I didn't have anything.
Okay. Commissioner Dye, did you have a response to that?
Yeah, so again, this may have been my misinterpretation, but after the whole discussion we had at the last meeting, I thought the whole idea was to have this be informal. that's something, so we didn't want to burden the full commission with another committee. And so that basically Commissioner LaVolsey and I would continue to, work with these folks and basically get their recommendations and, hopefully provide another nice, simple table that is easy to, absorb with pros and cons based on our discussion. So that will be the output from this group to present to, their recommendations to us as a group. And then, I would hope that when we're ready to discuss it, that we'd have them on the line to answer any questions.
So thank you for clarifying. I would like to make a motion that in the next meeting, in the next regular meeting in the May Elections Commission meeting, that Commissioners Dye and LaVolsey provide more specifics around the deliverables and how information will be provided to the Elections Commission around the what's been happening with the advisory committee meetings. So
Sure.
yeah, I don't know if people, yeah, I still would like that to be a motion. So let me clean that up a little bit. I move that Commissioners Dye and LaVolsey in the next regular Elections Commission meeting provide the Elections Commission with more details around the actual output and governing process of that advisory committee and how they will be, provide that in their next plan to us at the May meeting. Still jumbled, but hopefully still clear.
Second.
Thank you. Before we take public comment, Commissioner Dye, are there other items on this agenda item that you would like us to talk about or potentially take action on?
Yeah, I wanted to give DCA Flores a chance to talk about briefly where they are on the legal analysis. Basically, I had mentioned to President Peskin the possibility that we as a commission would ask him to support this bill, and I sent him the fact sheet, which he promptly sent to his chief of staff. And he said, if the commission wants us to support it, we will support it. So it's really up to us on that. And yeah, I'm not a lawyer either, which is why I asked our lawyers to provide that analysis. And I know that they were working on it and waiting on approval. Would you like to say anything on when we might expect that?
No, as I mentioned to you via email, we're still waiting for it to be reviewed by our supervisors. And when I say supervisors, I don't mean the board of supervisors, our internal process.
Vice President Giordano.
Yes, so in terms of so this is DC Flores, this is the legal analysis that's being talked about of the bill?
I mean, I don't know what Commissioner Dye envisioned a legal analysis would be, but our memo basically just is a general overview of SB 1248, and we assume for the purposes of the memo that if SB 1248 applies to San Francisco, then we compare our own charter section to the sections in 1248. So no, there's no further analysis than that.
Because I'm not sure if this is in the scope of what you're doing, but one of the things I would like to understand is, like, if this bill were to pass as it's currently written, would San Francisco be required to pass a charter amendment, or would, if the bill passed, does that mean that at that point, because it's state law, the board could just pass changes via an ordinance, or is that something that your analysis would cover?
So, so redistricting is part of the charter in San Francisco. So, in order to change the charter, you would have to take it to the voters.
But if a state bill requires, certain lot of the
The state bill requires the changes be made by legislative action. So that could mean that the board puts it on the ballot.
But what if the voters don't pass it? Like, then, you know what I'm saying? It's like, what if the voters don't support the thing that the state law needs them to support? Would you just keep doing more amendments until it passes, or?
Yeah, I think we haven't thought that far because it's just in the thinking stages right now of the bill. So
Yeah.
if the bill comes close to being passed and actually it passes and gets signed by the governor, I'm sure that at that point we'll answer all these questions.
Okay.
And just a reminder, under AB 1248, you have until March 1st, 2030 to make these changes. So you have 7 years. So we can accomplish something in 7 years.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Commissioner Jordanik, I am not a lawyer, but I think that the way that 1248 may be written supersedes our local law. So we have to implement it. I don't know that it has to go in front of the voters. If we want to do something that would update the current redistricting, then we have to take it to the voters because it has to go to the voters because it's a change to the charter. But something at the state level would supersede, I think, any of that.
Yeah, and that's exactly right.
But we have what she's saying is we have 7 years to do it.
Yeah, so
The way the law is written,
Vice
with
President,
no sponsors.
Vice President Jordanik, we can say.
Yeah, and that was exactly my question. If you have a state law that trumps the charter, then maybe a charter amendment is no longer needed to.
It may not be, but if there's 7 years, I would just think that, I'm not a lawyer, but that's what I'm thinking.
Commissioner Dye.
yeah, and some of you might remember that Jen Say from the League of Women Voters had made a comment at our last meeting that one way of implementing the change might be simply to line out everything that's existing in the charter about the redistricting task force, which would then allow state law to take precedence.
Oh, I see, yeah.
So it might still require a charter amendment to delete things in the charter.
Yeah, well, I think that'd just be perfunctory.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table. It sounds as though we're going to wait for any other analysis on the letter. We'll hold off for now. Let's move to public comment, if you don't mind.
Okay, I'm checking right now. I do see a number of people online, but no one has raised their hand.
Thank you, Vice President Jordanik. Okay, so let's take a vote on the motion to have Commissioners Dye and Lavolsi provide in the next Elections Commission meeting more insight and a detailed explanation of output that will come from the advisory committee. Vice President Jordanik.
Yes.
Commissioner Bernholz.
Yes.
Commissioner Dye.
Aye.
Commissioner Hayden Crowley.
Yes.
Commissioner Lavolsi is absent. Commissioner Parker.
Yes.
And I, President Stone, vote yes. So the motion passes unanimously with one absent. Thank you, Commissioner Dye. We, as always, appreciate the efforts and investment to push this forward. Okay, we're going to close out agenda item number 8. Agenda item number 9, agenda items for future meetings, discussion and possible action regarding items for future agendas. So I'll just mention one quick thing. Secretary Davis, who has already just hit the ground running, has been very good at holding me accountable to trying to set up time for the retreat. So please, look out for that. It is coming. We are talking about it, but we recognize people's schedules are, not wide open. So we will be in touch about dates. That is something hopefully we'll talk about in the next meeting. The next one, of course, is the redistricting and getting some of the updates. Is there anything else right this moment that folks would like to elevate?
Can you clarify what your expectations are around the retreat? Because I have very limited time.
Yes, I will provide that in the next meeting, but the idea behind the retreat, which I believe I introduced in the last meeting, is to do an offsite where we discuss some strategic priorities, including providing some history on things such as open source, in addition to other strategic priorities. But then also perhaps doing a tour of Pier 31, and then also maybe just grabbing a beer.
I don't drink.
Well, there are some
Don't join.
we can find you some iced tea, some
What, are
sparkling
you looking at,
water.
are you looking at a day, a weekend? What are you looking at?
We don't have that yet, but
Okay,
we
all right,
will,
just-
we will, and it's okay if you can't make it. The world will keep going. Time continues. Don't sweat it. The idea is to just get into a different space, have some good conversations, but also just build a little camaraderie. I think after a lot that went on last year and the new body being intact, I think it would be a good opportunity for us to come together. And of course, members of the public will be invited to participate as well. Is there anything else that folks would like to elevate? Okay, let's take public comments.
I see no hands raised.
Excellent. So with that, we'll close out agenda item number 9, and it's 10:01, and I have adjourned this meeting of the Regular Elections Commission.